Now we have the great honor to welcome here in our midst Cardinal Tagle. I guess most of us know him. He's a senior prelate and one of the most prominent voices in global leadership and mission in the Catholic Church. He was Archbishop of Manila from 2011 to 2020 and then became Cardinal in 2012. Now he's a Pro-Prefect of the Dicastery for Evangelization at the Roman Curia. His emphasis is on evangelization, intercultural dialogue, pastoral accompaniment of diverse communities across the global context. He was also president of Caritas Internationalis from 2015 to 2023. So thank you for being with us and most welcome here. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Sister. Hi. Are you still awake? Oh, yeah, yes, it's 2:00. It is a great honor and joy for me to be with you at the opening of this year's International Safeguarding Conference, being held at the Pontifical Gregorian University through the Institute of Anthropology. The theme of this year's conference, One Commitment, Many Contexts, Safeguarding Across Cultures, highlights a global concern, and in a special way, a concern of the universal church, which is the communion of local churches. The question of unity in diversity surfaces repeatedly as we face a world increasingly divided, seemingly helpless in finding paths towards unity and common purpose and common action. What we seek is a unity that does not negate diversity. And conversely, we are seeking for a legitimate diversity that does not block unity. Allow me to offer some thoughts, not specifically on safeguarding, but on the question of cultures, the diversity and the unity. I have 3 points here, which you can always correct in your workshops. So first, culture. There are various ways of defining or describing culture. A modified classical sociological definition used by John Carrera, E. Carrera of the Society of Jesus, states that, and I quote, "Culture is the whole complex of forms of feeling, acting, and thinking shared by a society, which allows members of a group to survive, provides them a sense of identity and belonging, and gives their lives meaning." So the end of the quotation. So culture contains ways of feeling, acting, and thinking, which are deeply personal and are profoundly communal. In fact, culture is almost second nature to us. We don't even know that we are behaving culturally. Survival, identity, and values of a society and its individual members depend largely on their culture. So when you move from your culture to another, even temporarily, you feel a bit strange, confused, and even threatened. When I first came to Italy and they asked me, "Primo piatto?" Primo piatto. I mean, I'm used to only one plate. And everything is there. Now, how come there's a first, a second, a third? So I just decided, no fame. Now, to make culture more concrete, we move from this sociological definition to the ordinary signs or bearers of a people's culture. This is what I would call a pastoral reading of culture. Some examples are the use and arrangement of space. When I attend parties, I say, why is there a separate table for the bishops and the... That's a culture. When I enter a church, how far is the altar from the first pew? Who are seated here and who are seated there? When somebody talks to me in some cultures, their face is already here. And I say, space. COVID created another culture, distance. Now, language reflects culture. I had a student who used to call me my Lord. I said, call me Bishop. Yes, my Lord, call me Bishop. I am not the Lord. But he kept on calling me my Lord. So I said, why don't you call me Jesus Christ? I said, no, I cannot do that. Okay. The heroes that are remembered and are honored. In some cultures, the heroes are always military people. They don't declare a beggar and a homeless a hero. Systems of awards and punishment. Who are rewarded? If you park in the wrong parking area, you are immediately punished. But in some cases, they take years and decades of so-called investigation until something is forgotten. Rituals. We had an example, a beautiful example. Food. I already said something about food. Sense of time. When somebody invites me to a meeting, especially in the Philippines, they say, the meeting starts at 5 o'clock. My next question is, Philippine time or European time? And then they say, well, whenever you arrive. Okay, now, Jesus was very much part of his Jewish culture, but he also offered his own brand of culture, which challenged and purified other cultures. I believe such challenge and purification coming from Jesus was not meant to kill any culture, but to free it from whatever blocked its full human blossoming. So let us give some examples of how Jesus renewed culture. For example, space. He rearranged the accepted boundaries of space by touching people with leprosy and allowing himself to be touched by a woman known to be a sinner. The space between impure and pure was crossed by Jesus. He introduced a new language where God, the distant God, could be called with a familiar name, Abba. He praised Samaritans and outsiders as heroes and heroines of faith. The Syrophoenician mother, the Good Samaritan in the parable, the repentant criminal who was promised a place in the kingdom, and the Roman centurion who professed faith. Truly, this is the Son of God. In His overflowing mercy, a feast is prepared for a repentant prodigal son. Those of you who are married, if your son or daughter failed in the university, will you call your neighbors, "Let us have a feast"? My son just failed but returned home. He washed the feet of his disciples because that was the culture that he wanted. His sense of time depended on what the Father tells him. My hour has not yet come. Cultures are dynamic and constantly shift, even if some elements might endure. In our contemporary time, the economic system shapes our cultures. Images of a good life, what career to pursue, membership in a group. Science, technology, social communications, AI have been great movers and shakers and creators of culture these past decades. Wars, ethnic and religious conflicts, natural calamities, and the ensuing migration and the refugee crisis are shaking the grounds of cultures, both of the displaced people and of the countries of destination. The tension between the preservation of cultural identity and welcoming people of other cultures is real and painful. Many conflicts that harm our world today involve the disconnectedness of cultures and even clashes of cultures. That is why dialogue is indispensable. This is my second point. Dialogue and cultural intelligence. How can we approach dialogue in the context of cultures? The business world can teach us a lesson. In looking for managers and high-level administrators, business establishments set as one of the criteria what they call cultural intelligence. IQ, intelligence, IQ, yeah, and EQ, or emotional quotient, do not suffice for the business world. Cultural intelligence, or CQ, is important, and it has three components. First, I know my culture and how my culture affects my attitudes, priorities, work ethics, and relationships. Secondly, I study and try to learn from the cultures of other people so that I begin to understand why they behave as they do. Thirdly, I determine a path for my culture and their culture to learn from each other, challenge each other, purify each other, resulting in the affirmation of the diversity of cultures that does not hinder, but facilitates walking together towards the common good. Ultimately, cultural intelligence is the capacity to engage in and facilitate dialogue. Cultural intelligence goes hand in hand with contextual intelligence, or the patience and respect with which contexts are understood. It is also clear that while artificial intelligence can give information about cultures and contexts based on their database, only human beings can understand, be amazed, and dialogue to build human bridges. The church needs cultural intelligence to be able to engage in dialogue with traditional and emerging cultures. Dialogue grows with discernment. Father Carrera says, the task of discernment requires great prudence in order to avoid facile condemnation of values that are mixed with elements which may seem strange to our Christian language and manner of doing things, but which actually convey a Christian vision and make it a reality in important ways. At the same time, discernment should refuse to recognize other values that enjoy widespread social acceptance but are not compatible with Christian ethics. So being an acceptable element does not make it ethically right. May I continue so that I can close? Reverend James Sweeney, a Passionist missionary, rightly observes that faith-culture crisis in many parts of the world puts in question the capacity of the church as it currently exists to be an effective witness to the gospel before today's cultures. The embattled stance of blaming culture or the enemies of truth outside or within the church is hardly convincing. If the gospel is to be a leaven for transformation of humanity, it has to meet cultures in depth. What in our Dicastery we would call the evangelization of cultures. We need cultural intelligence for the sake of the gospel and humanity. With humble hearts, we confess that the failure in cultural intelligence and dialogue occurs within local churches and between local churches. I think you know one young bishop in Mozambique. He used to work in our Dicastery. I even went to Mozambique 2 years ago to ordain him a bishop. He was killed. And the police arrested the diocesan chancellor as the prime suspect who organized the murder. Is it because they belong to different ethnic groups? Is it because of some internal administrative issues? No. And finally, the culture of alienating individualism and the culture of convocation coming together. One of the great gifts of our time is the value placed on individual human persons, the dignity of every human person. The assertion and appreciation of the personal self is good and necessary for society. This is called individualization. It prevents human beings from being reduced to mere spare parts of a big social machinery. Unfortunately, this healthy process of individualization has been pushed to an extreme called individualism. Not anymore individualization, but individualism. The individual and community have become enemies. The culture takes the laissez-faire attitude that the individual reigns supreme and individuals can look after themselves, comments Father Sweeney. Father Carrera observes that in this culture, it is the individual alone who must achieve something in society. So look at the increasing number of self-help or do-it-yourself manuals. Through selfies, we do not need other people to take photographs of ourselves. Individual rights are stressed rather than duties to other people and duties to society. Individualism is the economic sphere manifested in competitiveness over cooperation. The educational system reinforces individualism with beautiful words like personalization, creativity, and initiative. Attenzione. The culture of individualism has many social forms, for societies could be culturally individualistic too. It's not just single persons that could be individualistic. Whole societies could be individualistic too. Some examples are ethnocentrism, nationalistic xenophobia, and religious intolerance. Individualism makes people stigmatize others who are different from them, discriminate against them, and see them as strangers in distorted recognition of human beings. The culture of individualism sets up barriers between people and relegates into ghettos those who must remain invisible. This culture also engages in scapegoating, blaming all ills of society on the minority, the strangers, the alien, the migrant, the poor. So they will say, oh, our city used to be clean, but when these migrants came, it started becoming dirty. Oh, really? The irony of it all is that a culture of individualism is one of the causes of the disappearance of the individual person and dignity, beginning with the individualist himself or herself. In individualism, human beings isolate themselves from the social habitat from which individuality is born and grows. An individualist loses friends and neighbors, eventually becoming nobody. An individualist inhabits a world that is so narrow that it does not even have room for himself or herself. But the truth is that human people are fulfilled both individually and socially at the same time. We should, however, be equally critical of cultures that disregard legitimate individuality in the name of false communitarism. I conclude, thanks be to God. Here, the contrast between the Tower of Babel in Genesis 11 and Pentecost in Acts of the Apostles chapter 2 becomes clear. The story of Babel begins with a picture of seeming unity in language and words. This unity was utilized for a project. And I quote, "Let us build ourselves a city and tower with its top in the sky, and so make a name for ourselves. Otherwise, we shall be scattered all over the earth." The ambition to pierce the realm of God and to make a name for oneself will never bring unity. It is the sure path to scattering and conflict. That happened in Babel and continues to happen in the many Babels of our time. The Holy Spirit that descended on the disciples of Jesus who were praying with Mary, the other women and friends, enabled them to go out of the room and speak in different languages of the mighty deeds of God. Individualist speech scatters because it is self-serving, contrary to dialogue and community. The language of communion is that of the Holy Spirit, centered on the acts of God for the salvation of all. The actions of God for the salvation of all. That's the point of communion. It is our prayer that this interdisciplinary conference, inspired by the Holy Spirit, may be fruitful for our common mission of promoting human dignity in all cultures and in the whole human family. Thank you for your patience. Thank you.